So I've changed my position, Vinnie, just so that you know. So my new title is Executive Director, Office of the CHRO. And I moved from products into what we call solutions, marketing solutions management. And so we're really at a stage in our company and with our portfolio now of products that we have for the Office of the CHRO to evolve from selling products to selling solutions. And really what that means is providing the art of the possible, best practices. So a unique philosophy, and we have one around belonging and diversity, along with best practices that we ourselves have created internally and we use, but also collaborated with customers on, and then showing how you bring it to life in the product. So that's really kind of been my mission. And we have 6 solutions, but today we're just going to focus on the belonging and diversity. Of course, Safe Harbor, I'll move through. The big news is, with Karen Taylor, she's our Chief Diversity Officer. She's had a vision. She's been at Workday a little over 3 years. And last year in my product role, she came to me saying, I really need a solution that can help me understand where we are. What are the outcomes we're getting across the entire talent and employee lifecycle? And if we're getting parity across all of the different segments of our workforce. So are we treating female Asians as well as we're treating male Asians compared to white males? So, really wanted a tool. She had tons of analytics, tons of data, but how do I know where to focus and where can I have the greatest impact for change? So that brought about 2 new solution offerings that we announced. One is Vibe Central, and Vibe Central is just taking all of the dashboards and data that are available for free. So all of our HCM customers have this. There's no charge for this, and helping them enable the demographic diversity data that they have available in HCM. There's so many data attributes from gender identity to sexual orientation to disability that they can configure to really help them understand and get insights into where they are in the diversity and belonging efforts. And then the Vibe Index is really on top of Prism Analytics because it brings in third-party sentiment data for belonging and provides this heat map to really look across the entire employee and talent life cycle that you see here: hires, promotions, leadership, belonging, and also attrition, as well as across the intersections that you want to look at, right? The intersections that are most pertinent to your diversity demographic data as an organization. For us, it's looking at the combination of gender and ethnicity and being able to see, do we have equity or parity? So I'll go into more about these offerings, but that's really what the news is all about, is these 2 new capabilities that we are offering to our customers. And basically, why this is important at this time is everyone knows that diversity and belonging makes good business sense, right? And everyone's had intentions for a long time, right? People have been focused on it. Everyone's been setting goals, but we're not seeing the progress, right? The intentions are not resulting in the outcomes that we expect to be. And so really looking at this over the last couple of years, we boil it down to kind of 2 major issues. The first is companies have been focusing on diverse representation, and there's more to do there, but they haven't been looking at, after you get diverse representation in the door, how do you make sure that you have an inclusive experience, that you provide an equal opportunity? So just as important as all the talent acquisition to get diverse representation in the door is also focusing on the talent retention and growth of that talent. So we call that number 1 issue, diversity without focusing on the experience, the inclusion and belonging as well, as really important shift that needs to happen. And then the other problem that we're seeing is people were setting goals, but not able to get their goals. They didn't have an accountable system. And so really providing an accountable system to help them go from goal setting to goal getting is what we set out to tackle.
I would presume people, your customers, are showing more interest in the inclusion part, or are you getting interest in both?
Actually belonging. So inclusion, so the market has really evolved. So what we're seeing now is a really focus on belonging. And the difference we say is diversity is a fact. Do you have diverse representation or not? Inclusion is really a behavior. Are you creating equal opportunities across the board? Are you including everyone equally? Belonging is really the sentiment. How does the person feel? Do they feel like they're part of a culture that cultivates belonging. And so the belonging is turning out to be the most important, or becoming the more important one, but you have to really look at all of them. Not just the diverse representation, but that's why we call it VIBE: value, inclusion, belonging, and equity. Go beyond representation to make sure that you put as much emphasis on the inclusion, belonging, and equity as well. And then the next piece is really creating that accountable system. So how do we help organizations go from goal setting to goal getting? How do we provide what we call accountable analytics, not actionable, but accountable? And that's how they can go from intentions to getting the outcome. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I think at the heart of our approach is being able to, first see your outcomes. So what are you seeing? That's the VIBE index. What are the outcomes I'm getting from my diversity and belonging efforts? Where am I, and where do I have the greatest impact for change? And then based on the outcomes I'm getting, really looking to the factors that are causing the reasons behind why you're getting the outcomes that you have, and then being able to take the actions. And we say Workday HCM, but really what that means is talent acquisition, talent optimization, compensation for pay equity, and of course the employee experience, right? And then what's really important is looking at and understanding all the unique attributes of your employees that make up their experience. So what's happened in the past, traditional systems, they looked at outcomes at the employee level. So this looks good. If I look at average promotion, average belonging, average attrition, that all looks great. But we have to really look at the intersectionality. So not just male and female, African American and Asian, but combining the connections between the fact that I'm female and Asian, and I may be Generation X. So really starting to look at the intersections, because it's these intersections that are really defining their sense of belonging, their sense of inclusive, and really tailoring their experience. So this is what's really different about the VIBE Index. And what's unique about our offering is where we've been investing since Karen Taylor started 3.5 years ago, is really making a robust capability to capture, to self-identify across all of these different dimensions. So, we have customers with 65, 85 gender codes, all the different definitions and breakdowns of ethnicity that you want to capture, to sexual orientation, to pronouns, to religion. So we support all of these attributes, and these are the attributes that we can bring together into what we call intersections, multiple dimensions. And what's important about that is if we drill into that 80% average belonging across all employees, and we start to look at it as intersections, we see a completely different picture. So what we thought we had a good sense of belonging, we're finding that male Asians are not having as high of a sense of belonging as we see with male and female white people. And then this underrepresented minority is URM. So that's really important. So this is really the journey that we went on with Workday, and that our customers are now going on. Is in the past, analytics never brought intersection into play. It only looked at gender, or it only looked at race. It didn't look at the combinations.
So 2 questions. Is compensation
Sure.
one of the data points you look at? And
yeah, it's one of the indicators that we look at, absolutely. So when we look at equity, that is one of the key factors that we look at.
And how about
so when we get to
age?
Pardon me?
How about age as a dimension?
Yeah, generation. Absolutely. Generation is a big one that companies look at. Now, what we have found most helpful for us in our journey is the intersections that we use in our VIBE Index is gender and ethnicity. And of course, you have to change those dimensions as you're a global company, because in certain countries you can't capture ethnicity or race. So there's other information that might be more pertinent to those countries. And what we're finding is the best method to collect that demographic data is through self-identification. So really allowing employees to self-identify, allowing them to mark private or public. And we've had customers like Accenture that's been able to get 97% coverage of that diversity demographic data, all through self-identification. So very, very powerful way to collect that information. So then I was going to go through the VIBE Index, the VIBE Central, and then the actions. So I'll start with the outcomes. And that's really kind of teeing up where the VIBE Index is different. So what makes the VIBE Index different? What Karen was so excited about in Phil Wilburn and our customers is the breadth and the depth, right? So it's not just looking at diversity and inclusion, it's looking at belonging and equity. The other, when we say breadth and depth, is it's also looking across the entire employee and talent life cycle. So from hiring to once they're in the door, looking at leadership and promotion to their actual employee experience. The second key piece is bringing that intersectionality in, right? Not looking at it as one dimension, but looking at it as combinations of dimensions. And then really important, what Karen Taylor always says is we want to have a great place to work for all. We're really looking at equity and parity across all of the intersections. And so that's why the heat map was designed, is to really show us, the red is where we have disparity. The blue and the green is where we're having a good experience. So really helping us narrow down exactly where to focus. So if we bring that all together into the Vibe Index, you can see that the rows are really looking at the entire employee life cycle. And if we look at the columns, that's where we're really looking at the intersectionality. And then you bring that combination together, and that's where we get the heat map. Now, the thing to point out here is we look at the representation. So that's really important. We're looking at, there's 11.6% of the population is female Asians. So this lets us kind of have a baseline, a tolerance as we calculate and look at how we're faring. So you can see here that if we have 11.6 representation of female Asians, overall, why do we have such a low percentage in leadership? So that kind of gives you an idea of how to look at it. Now the scores at the bottom are very helpful too, and I'll go through some examples where you can see that the score is always going to be on a scale of 0 to 5. So it doesn't matter how many intersections you have, it always goes back to a scale of 0 through 5. 1 is, 5 is the best, 1 is the lowest. So this tells you right now that leadership is the area that you have the lowest score. So you want to change your outcomes. Leadership is probably the #1 area to focus. And then if you look at the group scores, it's telling you that your underrepresented minorities and male is where that you have to have the biggest opportunity to drive positive change for them. So that's where you want to focus.
The belonging metrics, I presume you're getting them through surveys?
Yes, so we have 6 questions that we ask to monitor the belonging of employees. And then what's also nice is it does look at equity. So it's not just combining the outcome and group scores to get the Vibe score. It's looking at parity across the groups. So if you have all groups, doing equally well, even though it may be a lower score, you might get a higher Vibe score than if you have some groups doing really well and other groups not doing well. So it's got an algorithm that's really looking to make sure that you've got parity, and it's a great place to work for all. And then you can kind of see how you can look and say, okay, for female Asians, we're about a 3. The key areas that we need to focus in on are leadership and attrition. You can also see, this is the one that you have the greatest ability to impact change across hires, promotions, leadership, and attrition. And then you can also focus in on maybe one particular area of the talent lifecycle, and that's how are you doing succession planning? How are you're building your leadership bench? So that's the Vibe Index. So it's really designed to provide very quickly to our Chief Diversity Officer and business leaders and HR leaders, what are our outcomes? How are we doing with all our diversity and belonging efforts? And where do we have the greatest ability to drive positive change? So if we're going to make commitments and create a strategy, where should we focus? And then if we go into it, what comes next is that Vibe Central, right? So now that we know our outcomes, how do we dig in and figure out what all of the indicators are, factors behind those outcomes? So the Vibe Central is designed to mirror and complement the Vibe Index. So you can drill into hires, promotions, leadership, all of these attributes to find out what are the factors. And then if we bring that together with the ability to take action in Workday HCM, we actually took 2 years worth of work. So Phil Wilburn, Karen Taylor, Greg Pryor, all of our practitioners, spent 2 years really digging into this and, looking at these outcomes, hiring, promotion, leadership, belonging, and attrition. These are the scores in the Vibe Index, then mapping them to indicators in Vibe Central. So if you're not getting the hiring outcomes that you thought, if it's not as diverse and inclusive, where do you need to look to improve those outcomes? So it could be in sourcing, it could be your conversion ratio from interview to screen to hire, or it could be in your onboarding effectiveness. So really mapping outcomes to indicators, and then most importantly is those indicators into actions that you can take within Workday, whether it's talent acquisition, talent optimization, employee experience, core HCM with compensation, to improve those outcomes. So mapping that out. So 2 years worth of best practices and knowledge is what we're sharing then with our customers. And then just to kind of walk you through an example, here's one that we've found really, really impactful. So when we're not achieving the hiring outcomes that we want to achieve, really starting to look at the conversion ratio and identifying, is our problem at the top of the funnel, meaning is it a problems with our recruiter, and we're seeing that, or is the problem in the middle of the funnel, so maybe it's our interview team, or is the problem in the hiring manager at the bottom of the funnel? And then what actions could we take to remove that bias to improve our conversion ratio? And then we kind of show them how they can use the system to do that. So, we have all of this capability in the Vibe Central, is being able to take a look at, and I'll just show you one example. So this is the funnel, right? The top of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel. And we can see a huge drop off between, the candidates that we saw and screened to offers being accepted, and we can look at it by the different segmentations and dimensions. And so given that, what can we do to improve that? So really looking at candidate masking so that we can remove bias from the interview team, or we can use remove bias from the hiring manager, to doing monitoring and nudges to make sure that they're conscious of the bias. And then maybe we do skills-based selection. So we've removed, anything from being the criteria except for skills itself. So really kind of showing not just how to look at the outcomes, but how to look at the factors causing those outcomes, and then helping you get to actions. And so we did actually build the benchmarks into the Vibe Central so they could see. And what we did is we showed them where are they to the median. So if we look at the average across our customers, so that was a key input that they wanted in the Vibe Central. And I think you're spot on where Vibe Index will go. Right now, it's helping them understand where they are internally.
Sure.
But I think as this gets more and more rolled out, you can see in the future, definitely on our roadmaps, a Vibe Index benchmark, right? So where are you compared to your peers?
And are you getting a sense for where they're starting off? Is it in middle management? Is it top management? Or is it, more?
Yeah, it seems to be, it's a unique combination of HR business partner, diversity officer, and then someone in analytics, workforce analytics. It's that three, and it's usually at a higher level. It's at a VP level.
No, but who are they benchmarking?
Who are they benchmarking against? It's usually at a company level, not at a division level or a lower level. Yeah.
They're not focusing on any particular group of employees.
I think diverse representation is still top of mind, because I don't think we've achieved that. So that and inclusion and belonging, it depends on where they are. So some companies that are more sophisticated, like a Dow or an HBI, they've got diverse representation. So they're really focused in on, how do we keep that? How do we do that inclusion and belonging in that experience, where others are still trying to get that diverse representation in the door.
It's fantastic. I mean, the response seems to be great.
Yes, it's overwhelming. We're actually bringing in partners now to help with some of the workshops and sharing some of the methodology. So I think that will help as well.
And, like you said, they've been doing it for 20, 30 years. What was broken? Obviously, the belonging part they didn't have enough of. But even in the metric they were collecting, what was broken?
I think the hard part was there's so much data, and the data was at male or female, Asian. So
wasn't.
Yeah, the intersectionality was a big problem, and then and a heat map to focus. Like, if there's so many metrics we're looking at, how do we know? And then they didn't really have a way to look at parity. So the comparison across segmentations was also important. So it's, like you said, getting that breadth to include belonging and inclusion, and then being able to look across the entire life cycle, looking at intersections, not just one dimension, and then being able to really look at parity, right? That is very differentiated in a problem that organizations were facing.
Barbry, this is great. Why don't we do an update in a few months? You can.
That sounds great. I would love that, Vinnie.
Because I'm sure you'll see it evolve, right? And it'll be good to bring you back, and we can talk about this again.
I would love that. We can even maybe bring a customer.
Fantastic. We could do that even earlier if you want.
Yeah, because we're going through our early adopters now, so I think that would be a great add-on to it.
Yeah, in a month or two, if one of them is ready to be on, we can do a 3-way session.
That sounds awesome, Vinnie.
Thank you.
All right.